The Champagne Socialist experienced a comprehensive dismantling during a town hall showdown in Queens. You probably should return to bartending, because, at least back then, you were honest about what you were serving to your customers. The community center in Queens had not witnessed a crowd of this magnitude since the Mets clinched the pennant in '86. Every single folding chair was occupied, and every wall was lined with spectators pressed shoulder to shoulder. Outside the venue, dueling groups of protesters waved signs ranging from campaign slogans for 2028 to demands for Sandy to return to Westchester. The air conditioning system had surrendered the fight against 300 bodies crammed into a space designed for half that number. Sweat and palpable anxiety mingled in the stifling, overheated air inside the hall. The bright studio lights from the CNN crew were certainly not helping the temperature. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat on the left side of the stage, her outfit alone likely costing more than what most people in that room earned in a month. She wore a designer blazer with subtle Bronx-colored threading, a very on-brand fashion statement. Her statement necklace caught the overhead lights perfectly, while her heels added 3 inches to her 5'4" stature. She appeared entirely prepared for a high-fashion photo shoot, which, considering her history, might have been the primary objective all along. Dan Bongino sat on the right side of the stage, dressed in a simple dark suit and a white shirt with no tie. The former Secret Service agent turned podcast host looked as if he had just arrived from a working man's funeral. His folder rested closed on the table in front of him, waiting patiently for the right moment. The moderator, a nervous local news anchor who clearly understood this event, was several pay grades above his station, cleared his throat into the microphone. "Welcome to tonight's town hall discussion on economic policy," he began tentatively. "Before we start," AOC interrupted, her voice carrying that distinctive combination of rehearsed outrage and upward inflection. "I just want to address the elephant in the room immediately." She paused for effect, allowing the television cameras time to find her angle. Or perhaps I should say, the washed-up police officer turned conspiracy theorist, she added with a smirk. The left side of the audience exploded with applause, and someone actually shouted a supportive slang phrase from the back. Bongino did not move and did not blink, simply watching her with the same expression he likely used when observing suspects through one-way glass during his Secret Service days. Mr. Bongino has spent the last year spreading falsehoods, profiting off fear, and generally making a living by misleading hard-working Americans. AOC smiled the same smile seen in 1,000 campaign photos, practiced and perfect. "So I am glad we are finally having this conversation in person, where he cannot edit out the parts where he is wrong." More applause followed, and camera phones went up in the air like lighters at a rock concert. This was already content ready for viral distribution, and everyone in the room knew it. The moderator turned desperately to Bongino and asked if he would like to respond to the opening salvo. "Oh, I will definitely respond," Bongino said, and his voice had that particular outer borough accent that AOC's Westchester upbringing had never quite managed to replicate. "Authentic Queens is very different from performed Bronx, but first I have to say that is a nice outfit, Congresswoman." He gestured at her designer ensemble, noting the irony of her tax the rich message. "That was your message at the Met Gala while wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people here make in a month." The right side of the room erupted in cheers, while the left side started booing loudly. The moderator looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. Someone near the back yelled for the moderator to let him speak freely. And that was the moment when Dan Bongino opened his folder. "You see, before we talk about taxing the rich," he continued, extracting the first document with the deliberate care of a magician revealing the prestige, "maybe we should talk about becoming the rich." AOC's smile flickered just for a second, but the CNN cameras caught the micro-expression in perfect high definition. Because I did something crazy before coming here tonight to prepare for this debate. Bongino held up the document for the audience to see clearly. I actually read your financial disclosure forms, you know, the ones every member of Congress has to file as a matter of public record. And I have to tell you, it is a fascinating story of financial ascension. It is a real rags-to-riches story. Except the rags were designer, and the riches accumulated very quickly. He adjusted his reading glasses, a working man's gesture that somehow made him look more credible to the crowd. 3 years ago, when you got elected to Congress, your net worth was about $7,000. Those were rough times, fresh out of bartending and struggling, fitting the working-class hero narrative everyone loved. I was struggling, AOC started to interject. But today, Bongino talked right over her, his voice rising just enough to command the room. Today, according to your own filings that you signed under penalty of perjury, your net worth is over $1 million. He let that number hang in the suddenly quiet air for maximum impact. Even the protesters outside seemed to have paused their chanting. $1 million in just 3 years is an incredible financial feat. You know what that is. That is better returns than most hedge fund managers achieve. That is not the socialist American dream. That is just the regular American dream. The one you keep telling people is rigged against them. The congressional salary is fixed, she tried to explain again. It is $174,000 a year, which is good money. Do not get me wrong. My dad would have given anything for that kind of salary to support us. Bongino flipped to another page in his dossier. But even if you did not spend a single penny on rent, food, or those designer outfits you wear to protest capitalism, even if you lived like a monk and ate nothing but instant noodles, you would still be about $600,000 short of $1 million. The room had gone dead silent, and even her supporters were not sure where this line of questioning was going. So where did the rest of the money come from? He pulled out another document from his stack. Well, there is your book deal, which came with a nice advance. $250,000 to tell working people how to be working class. There are speaking fees of $25,000 per speech, which is funny for someone who campaigns against corporate greed. AOC's lawyer in the front row looked like he was trying to telepathically communicate for her to stop talking. But my personal favorite, Bongino smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Your boyfriend, Riley Roberts, has been on your campaign payroll as a consultant making $6,000 a month. That is $72,000 a year. For what exactly? He pulled out what looked like detailed expense reports, consulting on how to spend campaign funds on rent for your $3,500 a month luxury apartment in Navy Yard. That is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in D.C., by the way. Very working class to live right next to all those other working class folks paying $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom. Someone in the audience laughed. Then someone else joined in. Then the laughter was rolling through the right side of the room like a wave. Now I am not a socialist, he continued, leaning back in his chair like a prosecutor who knows he has already won the case. But I am pretty sure that is not how socialism is supposed to work in practice. I am pretty sure the whole point is that you are not supposed to become a millionaire off other people's money while preaching about income inequality. He reached into his folder again as the audience leaned forward in anticipation. This was better drama than anything currently streaming on Netflix. But hey, maybe I am being unfair. Maybe it is just smart business. His voice dripped with heavy sarcasm. Like when you bought that Tesla, you know, the $60,000 electric car. Very climate conscious, very green, and also very expensive. especially for someone who keeps telling her constituents to take the subway and reduce their carbon footprint. The moderator finally found his voice amidst the tension. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, would you like to respond to these allegations? AOC sat up straighter, her media training kicking in like armor. What Mr. Bongino is doing is a classic right-wing tactic. Attacking successful women for being successful while ignoring the systemic issues. Bongino laughed, and the sound cut through her prepared statement like a knife. Lady, I do not care about your success. I care about your hypocrisy. There is a massive difference between the two concepts. He stood up, something he had not done yet, and suddenly the former Secret Service agent seemed to fill the entire stage. You know what we call someone who makes millions while preaching socialism? He paused, looking directly at her with intensity. We call them a hypocrite, but you know what you call them? Another dramatic pause ensued as the cameras zoomed in. Congresswoman. The applause from the right side was deafening. 3 people stood up, then 5, then a dozen, then half the room was on their feet. AOC's face had gone from confident to carefully neutral. It was the mask she wore when confronted with facts she could not spin away. Her chief of staff was on his phone typing frantically, probably updating her Wikipedia page or calling for backup. It was hard to tell which action he was taking. Bongino sat back down, but he was not done. Not even close. You want to talk about systemic issues? Let us talk about systems. The system that let you go from $7,000 to over $1 million in 3 years. Because last I checked, the average American's net worth went down during that same period. Inflation hit them, and the cost of living crushed them. But you, he gestured at her designer outfit, you did just fine. Almost like the system works great if you know how to work it to your advantage. He organized his papers with theatrical precision. And before we move on to your other achievements, I just want to say one thing. If you think a millionaire socialist is an oxymoron, wait until you hear where her campaign money actually went. We will get to that. But first, there is another matter. Someone in the audience actually yelled out a religious affirmation. The moderator looked at his prepared questions, realized they were now completely useless, and quietly accepted that this town hall had officially jumped the rails. 3 empty chairs on the left side of the room marked where AOC supporters had already left. The exodus had begun early. Bongino pulled out a large photograph from his folder, an 8x10 glossy print. It was the kind you can see clearly from the back of the room. Speaking of using your platform for messaging, let us talk about the Met Gala. Before he even held it up, the right side of the room started booing. The photo showed AOC in her white tacks, the rich gown surrounded by celebrities and Manhattan's elite. She was smiling for the cameras like she had been born to that lifestyle. Which, given her Westchester upbringing, maybe she actually had been. Now for those who missed this moment in September of 2021. Bongino held up the photo like a prosecutor showing evidence to a jury. This is from the Metropolitan Museum of Art Gala, an annual fundraiser for the museum. It is very charitable, but also very exclusive. He walked toward the audience, holding the photo higher for everyone to see. Tickets to this event start at $35,000 per person. That is not a typo, $35,000, to eat dinner with Anna Wintour and watch billionaires pretend to care about art. AOC's jaw tightened visibly. I was invited as a New York elected official to represent the city. And you wore a dress, Bongino continued over her, his voice rising. That said, tax the rich in big red letters to an event where the rich pay $35,000 for the privilege of ignoring how ironic that is. He paused, looking at the photograph like he was seeing it for the first time. Actually, You know what? Let us talk about that dress, because it gets better or worse depending on your perspective. He pulled out another document from his file. The woman who designed your Tax the Rich dress, Aurora James, is a great designer. Also, and this is my favorite part, she owed over $100,000 in back taxes at the time she made your dress. Gasps rippled through the audience at this revelation. Someone near the back yelled that you simply cannot make this up. So let me get this straight, Bongino said, his Queen's accent getting thicker, the way it does when someone is getting genuinely heated about a topic. You wore a Tax the Rich dress to a $35,000 event, and the dress was designed by someone who was not paying their taxes. The irony is so thick you could tax the rich with it. Even some of AOC's supporters were having trouble maintaining their expressions of righteous support. But wait, it gets even better. Bongino was not smiling anymore. Let me tell you what was happening in your district that night. That same night you were at the Met Gala sipping champagne with people whose net worth has more zeros than most Americans will see in their lifetimes. He pulled out what looked like phone records. Your office received 47 calls that evening from constituents. 47 people reached out for help. I have the call logs right here, obtained through a public records request. Very legal and very legitimate evidence. He started reading from the document. Call 1 came in at 6:45 in the evening. My family is being evicted tomorrow. Where is the Congresswoman? Staff response: she is at an event. His voice got harder as he read the next line. Call 12 came in at 7:30 in the evening. My unemployment benefits were denied. I need help. Staff response: she is at an event. Call 28 came in at 8:15 in the evening. My mother cannot afford her medication. Can someone help? Staff response was the same. He looked up at AOC with a piercing gaze. Want to take a guess at what they said? The room was silent as he delivered the punchline. She is at an event. He threw the papers down on the table with force. An event where you were partying with billionaires while your constituents were losing their homes. AOC tried to recover her footing. I was making a statement about wealth inequality on a global stage. The only statement you made, Bongino cut her off, is that you are perfectly comfortable with wealth inequality, as long as you are on the wealthy side of it, as long as you get invited to the party, as long as you are inside looking out, instead of outside looking in. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the room's display system. A split-screen image appeared on the monitors around the room. On the left side was AOC at the Met Gala, laughing with Anna Wintour. On the right side was a woman in Queens holding an eviction notice. The date stamp showed they were from the exact same day. This person lives in your district, Bongino said quietly. The room had gone so silent, you could hear the CNN cameras whirring. While you were at the ball, Cinderella, they were losing their home. But I am sure your designer dress made a real difference to them. He let the image stay up for a long moment. Phone cameras clicked like cicadas in the summer heat. You want to know the worst part? Bongino's voice dropped even lower. I talked to some of the people who worked that event. The servers, the coat check people, the folks who made $35,000 look like a reasonable ticket price. You know what they told me? He pulled out a folded piece of paper. One of the servers, and I will keep their name anonymous because they still need to work in this city. They told me you did not tip. Not them. Not anyone on the staff. You waltzed into an event celebrating wealth, wore a dress critiquing wealth, and you did not even tip the working-class people serving you. That is a lie, AOC snapped, her composure finally cracking. Is it really? Bongino pulled out what looked like receipts. Because I have the billing records right here. Zero gratuity added to the bill. But I am sure that was just an oversight, right? You were probably too busy making statements about wealth inequality to actually redistribute any wealth to the people serving you. Someone in the audience began a slow clap. Then another person joined, then another. The sarcasm was brutal and unrelenting. AOC's hands found the podium, gripping it like a lifeline. "This is character assassination," she protested. "No," Bongino said, walking back to his seat. "This is fact-checking, and there is a difference. Character assassination is when you call someone a washed-up cop. Fact-checking is when you show the receipts to prove your point." He sat down and organized his papers calmly. "You know what Marie Antoinette said? Let them eat cake. You know what you are saying. Let them eat avocado toast. Same aristocrat, different century, same ending." The applause from the right was thunderous now. Even the moderator was nodding slightly, caught up in the moment despite himself. AOC's lawyer was making throat-cutting gestures, signaling her to stop engaging. She ignored him and leaned into the mic. "At least I am fighting for working people," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "At least I am trying to make real change. Fighting for working people?" Bongino's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Oh, that is a perfect transition. Let us talk about your greatest legislative achievement. Let us talk about the jobs you fought for." He pulled out a new section from his folder, and the smile on his face was absolutely predatory. "Let us talk about Amazon." The energy in the room shifted immediately. Even people who had been on their phones looked up. This was the big issue, and everyone knew it. In 2018, Amazon announced they were bringing their second headquarters to Long Island City. 25,000 jobs were promised. Good jobs, the kind of jobs that change lives. Bongino held up a news article with the headline, "Amazon chooses NYC for HQ2." These were not minimum wage jobs. These were careers for software engineers, project managers, and marketers. Average salary of $150,000 a year. In your district. In the communities you claim to represent. He let that sink in for the audience. 25,000 jobs averaging 150 grand. You know what that is? That is 25,000 families who could send their kids to college without drowning in debt. That is 25,000 mortgages that could get paid. That is 25,000 retirements that could be secure. But those jobs came with tax incentives. AOC started to argue. "And you killed them." Bongino's voice cut through the room like a guillotine. "You led the opposition, and you rallied against it. You called it corporate welfare. You said Amazon did not deserve tax breaks." He pulled out her tweet, blown up on poster board. "Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world." He read it out loud slowly, letting every word land. Then he looked up at her. "Defeated. You used the word defeated like it was a victory. Like stopping 25,000 jobs was something to celebrate." The left side of the room was mostly empty now, as the exodus was accelerating. "Let us talk about what those tax breaks actually meant," Bongino continued. "Amazon was going to get breaks on their city taxes in exchange for creating those jobs. Standard economic development deal, every city does it. You know why? Because even with the tax breaks, the city comes out ahead." He pulled out a simplified chart. Amazon would have generated $27 billion. That is billion with a B. In tax revenue over 25 years, even after the breaks. 27 billion that could have fixed schools, repaired roads, and funded programs. Now, the city gets zero. Zero jobs, zero tax revenue, zero economic development. But you got to trend on Twitter for a week, so I guess it all worked out. Someone in the audience yelled to tell her the truth. Bongino was not done yet. But here is the part that really gets me. Want to know who benefited from Amazon leaving? He pulled out campaign finance records. Union bosses who did not want non-union Amazon workers in the city. They donated $150,000 to your campaign before Amazon pulled out. After Amazon left, they donated another $200,000. Politicians in other districts that competed for those jobs won. Their communities got the investment, and they donated to you too. Gratitude, I guess, for taking yourself out of the competition. He pulled out another document, and his voice got even harder. And then there is your chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti. Remember him? He bought investment properties in areas competing with New York for Amazon. He bought low before the announcement. When Amazon chose somewhere else, these properties went up in value. He sold them for a nice profit. That is a conspiracy theory, AOC tried to deflect. It is public record. Bongino slapped the property records on the table. Purchase dates, sale dates, and profit margins are all filed with the appropriate authorities. Your inner circle made money when working people lost opportunities. He stood up again, and this time he walked to the edge of the stage. Let me tell you something. I grew up in this borough. My dad worked for the FDNY, a union guy, working class for real, not for Instagram. You know what he would have said about 25,000 jobs? Bongino's voice got thick with emotion. He would have said, "Thank God. Thank God those families will be okay." He turned back to AOC with intense scrutiny. But you celebrated unemployment. You literally threw a party when people did not get jobs. And you did it from your $3,500 a month luxury apartment. He pulled out his phone again and showed another split screen. Left side, AOC celebrating Amazon's departure. Right side, empty lot where Amazon would have been built. Bottom, closed small businesses that had been preparing for Amazon employees. These businesses closed, Bongino said quietly. Small businesses, mom and pop shops. They had invested in preparation for 25,000 new customers. They took out loans, hired staff, and ordered inventory. And then you killed their future. A woman in the third row was crying softly. "My brother's store," she said to no one in particular. "He closed last year." Bongino heard her and responded, "Ma'am, I am sorry. Your brother deserved better than a congresswoman who values Twitter likes more than jobs." AOC was shaking her head vigorously. Those Amazon jobs would have displaced people and gentrified neighborhoods. They would have employed people. Bongino's voice rose. They would have given families stability. But you decided for them. You decided they did not get to choose. You decided from your luxury apartment that they did not need those jobs. He walked back to his seat, but he was on a roll now. You want to talk about gentrification? You live in Navy Yard, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in D.C. You buy $60,000 Teslas, but you lecture people in Queens about accepting good-paying jobs. The moderator had given up any pretense of controlling this debate. He was just watching like everyone else. You know what the champagne socialist loves? Bongino was pacing now. She loves poverty. Not for herself, obviously, but for other people. Because poor people make great voters. Poor people need you. But employed people, people making six figures, they do not need a socialist congresswoman. They need you to get out of their way. He sat down hard, gathering his papers. Amazon jobs were too good for Queens, But your boyfriend's $72,000 consultant salary from campaign funds? That job was just fine. The recurring hook hit hard, and half the audience was nodding. If you know someone who lost a job opportunity because of this stunt, share this story. Bongino said, looking at the cameras. Show them what happens when ideology matters more than people. AOC looked at her staff. They were packing up their briefcases, avoiding eye contact. The smart ones were already planning their exits. But we are not done, Bongino announced. There was something almost gleeful in his voice now. Because your hypocrisy on Amazon is nothing compared to your hypocrisy on climate change. He pulled out a new folder and AOC visibly paled. You want to fight climate change? Bongino pulled out DMV records. In a $60,000 Tesla? He held up the registration. 6 months after taking office. 6 months after claiming to have $7,000 net worth. You bought a luxury electric car. Very working class. Very relatable. Electric cars are better for the environment, AOC started to argue. And you charge it at taxpayer-funded capital charging stations. Bongino pulled out utility records. We paid for your car. We pay to charge it. We pay for the infrastructure. And you lecture us about our carbon footprints while we are taking the bus because we cannot afford a $60,000 vehicle. Someone yelled, "Preach," from the crowd. But let us talk about your signature legislation. The Green New Deal. He said it like he was announcing a fight card. The plan to save America. The plan to save the planet. The plan to, how did you put it? Transform our economy. He pulled out a simple visual of a house. This represents the average American household. Then he wrote a number, $600,000. That is what the Green New Deal would cost each household over 10 years. $600,000. That is like buying a new house every 3 years for a decade. The audience gasped at the figure. Now you might say that is not fair. That is not how the math works. Bongino shrugged. Okay, let us do it your way. The Green New Deal's estimated cost is $93 trillion over 10 years. There are about 130 million households in America. Divided out, it is 600 grand per household. He let that number hang there. Most people in this room do not have $600,000 total. Not over 10 years total in their entire lives. But you want them to pay that to transform the economy. The cost of climate change is higher, AOC tried to interject. And you know who profits? He pulled out campaign finance records. Let me show you a pattern. He put up a timeline. March 2019. Solar company donates $50,000 to your campaign. April 2019. You mentioned that specific company in your Green New Deal proposal. May 2019. Their stock price jumps 30%. June 2019. Company executives donate another $75,000. He looked up at her. Funny how that works. He pulled out more records. Wind energy company, same pattern. Donate, get mentioned. Stock rises, donate more. Electric vehicle manufacturer. Donate, get mentioned. Stock rises. You buy their car, they donate more. It is not about saving the planet, Bongino said, his voice hard. It is about redistributing wealth from taxpayers to your donors. And judging by your Tesla and your bank account, some of that green is finding its way to you. He pulled out expense reports. Speaking of green, let us talk about your carbon footprint. He held up flight records. 6 private jet flights in 1 year. Private, not commercial. Private. The audience was in shock. Each one of those flights produces more carbon than the average American produces in an entire year. But you flew private 6 times while telling people to stop eating beef and take the bus. Those were campaign expenses. AOC protested. Oh, let us talk about beef. Bongino pulled out restaurant receipts. You suggested Americans should limit beef consumption to fight climate change. Very noble. Also very hypocritical. He held up the receipts. Peter Luger Steakhouse, twice. Campaign expenses. $200 steaks on donor money. You want us to stop eating beef while you feast on porterhouse. You want us to take the bus while you fly private. You want us to sacrifice while you live large. His voice dropped to something dangerous. That is not environmentalism. That is aristocracy. Let them eat plants while we eat steak. Let them take the bus while we fly private. Let them freeze in the dark while we live in luxury. The room erupted in applause. The Green New Deal is not about saving the planet, Bongino repeated. It is a scam, a green scam. And the champagne socialist driving her champagne Tesla knows it. AOC's hands were trembling now. Her carefully constructed persona was cracking piece by piece. Bongino organized his papers one more time. But you know what? Maybe I am being unfair. Maybe you really do care about working people. Maybe your origin story is real. He paused and smiled. Let us talk about that. Let us talk about where you are really from. And AOC's face went white as paper. You grew up in the Bronx, right? Bongino pulled out an address. That is your story. Girl from the Bronx. Working class, struggled, fought her way up. He held up the document. Except this is your childhood address. Yorktown Heights, Westchester County. He let that sink in. That is not the Bronx. That is one of the wealthiest counties in America. That is basically Connecticut's waiting room. The audience was riveted. Let me paint you a picture of Yorktown Heights in the 1990s. Bongino pulled out property records. Median home price, $500,000. At a time when the median American home was $120,000. Your childhood home cost more than 95% of homes in America. He pulled out school records. You went to Yorktown High School. Excellent public school in a wealthy suburb. Not exactly the struggle you sell on Instagram. I moved to the Bronx, AOC started to explain. For college, Bongino cut her off. You moved to the Bronx for college residency requirements. You barely lived there. You used it like a costume you put on for votes. He pulled out more records. Your father was an architect. Your mother was a cleaner, yes, but your father designed buildings. He was not working class. He was professional class, upper middle class. He stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. You know what the difference is between us, Sandy? The use of her real name, Alexandria Sandy, hit like a slap. I actually grew up in Queens. Real Queens, not Westchester pretending to be Bronx Queens. My dad was a union guy, FDNY. Your dad was an architect. My mom worked retail. Your mom worked too, but your family had money. We are not the same. He pulled out his own childhood photos. This was my house growing up. 2 bedrooms. My brother and I shared a room until I left for college on a scholarship. Then he showed her childhood home. This was your house. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, half an acre, very working class. The contrast was devastating. I worked real jobs because I had to, Bongino continued. You worked a bartending job for the aesthetic. I got a scholarship to college because we could not afford it. You had a college fund. When I became Secret Service, I protected presidents. What did you protect, Sandy? Your trust fund? The audience was completely silent now. This was personal in a way the previous attacks had not been. But let us talk about that bartending job, Bongino pulled out employment records. Because that is a key part of your working-class hero narrative. He read from the document. You worked at Flat's Fix, an upscale taco and tequila bar in Manhattan, not a dive bar in the Bronx. An upscale Manhattan establishment where appetizers cost $25. You made $40 to $60 an hour in tips. Not bad money. You worked there for less than a year, then quit for your political career. You had a safety net the entire time. Your family home, your support system. He looked at her. You did not work that job because you had to. You worked it because it made good content for your campaign videos. AOC tried to speak, but nothing came out. You are not from the Bronx, Bongino said quietly. You are from Westchester. You are not working class. You are upper middle class playing dress-up. Your entire identity is a brand. And like most designer brands, it is overpriced and fake. He pulled out video clips. Notice how your accent comes and goes. He played a clip of AOC speaking to a Bronx crowd. Thick accent, lots of slang. Then he played a clip of her speaking to wealthy donors. The accent completely gone, replaced by standard American English. My accent never changes, Bongino said, his Queen's accent thick and real. Because I actually grew up there. Your accent is as fabricated as your working-class credentials. He sat back down, gathering his papers. You are not a working-class hero. You are a trust fund kid doing cosplay. And the real people from the Bronx, they deserve better than a fraud from Westchester. The applause was deafening. Even former AOC supporters were clapping. The betrayal of finding out someone faked their entire background hit harder than policy disagreements ever could. Sandy from Westchester. Someone yelled, Sandy, Sandy, Sandy. The chant started small, but grew rapidly. AOC's lawyer was physically trying to pull her away from the microphone now. She shook him off. At least I care about people, she said, her voice breaking. At least I care about my community, about my family. Let us talk about family, Bongino interrupted, and his voice had gone cold. Let us talk about caring. Let us talk about your abuela. AOC's face went from pale to gray. The room fell silent. This was new, and no one had seen this coming. June 2021, Bongino said quietly. You posted on Twitter about your grandmother in Puerto Rico. Remember that? He pulled up the tweet on the monitors. Just left Abuela's house. Hurricane Maria relief has not arrived. Trump blocked relief. People are being left to die. This is what happens when you are poor in America, and the president hates you. You posted pictures, Bongino continued. Your grandmother's house damaged from Hurricane Maria. Years after the storm. Terrible conditions. Heartbreaking, really. He paused. And you used it to attack the Trump administration. You weaponized your own grandmother's suffering for political points. I was highlighting a crisis, AOC started. And then Bongino talked over her. A conservative commentator named Matt Walsh saw those pictures. And you know what he did? He pulled out the fundraiser page. He started a GoFundMe to help your grandmother. Not to make a political point, not to attack you, to help an elderly woman living in terrible conditions. Americans saw someone in need and opened their wallets. In 3 days, they raised $14,000 to help your grandmother. Strangers, people who probably disagree with your politics, but they saw a human being in need, and they helped. The audience was completely silent now. And you know what happened? Bongino's voice was shaking slightly. Your family refused the money, turned it down, told the organizers they did not want right-wing money. He let that sink in. Your grandmother was living in a damaged house. Strangers raised $14,000 to help her. And you said no because it came from the wrong political team. He pulled out repair estimates. You know what it would have cost to fix your grandmother's roof? About $15,000. The fundraiser raised $14,000, 7 times what was needed for immediate repairs. Money that could have fixed her house and helped other elderly people in her community. But you said no. He pulled out her financial disclosure forms again. And here is the thing, Congresswoman. You have over $1 million. Your grandmother needed $15,000 to fix her roof. You could have written a check. You could have helped your own grandmother with your own money, but you did not. The emotional weight in the room was crushing. My mother lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens her whole life, Bongino said, and his voice was thick now. When she needed help, I helped her with my money, not other people's donations, my money from my job. Because that is what you do for family. He looked directly at AOC. You have $1 million, and your grandmother was living in a damaged house. That is not politics. That is not socialism. That is not even about climate change or Trump or any of your usual excuses. That is character, or the lack of it. He pulled out her campaign finance records. Let me show you where your money went instead. He put up a simple breakdown. Boyfriend's consulting, $72,000. Luxury apartment, $42,000 a year. Designer clothes and Met Gala appearances, $10,000 plus. Tesla, $60,000. Private jet flights, $30,000 plus. You had money for all of this, but not for your grandmother's roof. He put up another split screen. Left, AOC at the Met Gala, $35,000 event, designer dress. Right, her grandmother's damaged house that could be fixed for $15,000. You spent more on one night of partying than it would have cost to fix your grandmother's house. One night, one dress, one event, or you rubbed elbows with billionaires. Someone in the audience was crying. My abuela would never forgive me, they said. Bongino heard it. Mine either. Because that is not how family works. That is not how caring works. That is not how being human works. He turned back to AOC. You raised money off your grandmother's suffering. You posted those pictures for political points. When people tried to actually help her, you said no, because they were on the wrong political team. When you could have helped her yourself, you bought a Tesla instead. You are not a socialist. You are not a champion of the people. You are just someone who uses everyone, even family, for personal gain. The room erupted not in applause, but in anger. Even her former supporters were shaking their heads in disgust. Someone yelled out, asking how her abuela was doing, predicting it would become a meme within hours. AOC stood up shakily. This is character assassination, she stammered. This is the truth, Bongino said, rising to his feet now. And you cannot spin it. You cannot tweet it away. You cannot make it about Trump or racism or whatever excuse you usually hide behind. Your grandmother needed help. Strangers offered. You refused. The end. That is the whole story. And it tells everyone everything they need to know about who you really are. Her lawyer was physically pulling her away from the microphone now. She let him guide her. The moderator tried to regain control, saying we should probably move on. But Bongino was not done. He stood at the edge of the stage, looked at the cameras, looked at the audience, and delivered his closing statement. You came here tonight to embarrass me. Called me a washed-up cop, a grifter, a conspiracy peddler. His voice was calm now, steady, the eye of the storm. But here is what I am. A kid from Queens who worked his way up honestly. Protected presidents with the Secret Service. Built a business without exploiting anyone. Helped my family with my own money. Never pretended to be something I am not. He gestured at AOC, who was gathering her things, her staff surrounding her like a protective wall. And you are Sandy from Westchester playing dress-up. A millionaire preaching socialism. A champagne socialist who never met a luxury you could not justify or a working-class person you could not exploit. You killed 25,000 jobs from your luxury apartment. You partied with billionaires in a $35,000 dress while preaching about inequality. You fly private while telling people to take the bus. You feast on $200 steaks while telling people to stop eating beef. You abandoned your own grandmother while claiming to care about the elderly. He paused to let it all sink in. You said tax the rich, then became the rich. You said you are from the Bronx, but you are from Westchester. You said you care about working people, then killed their jobs and celebrated. You said fight climate change, but from your Tesla and private jets. You said family matters, then abandoned your grandmother. His final line hit like a hammer. The only thing you have ever redistributed is the truth. And tonight, we took it back. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. AOC had already left through the back exit, her staff carrying boxes like they were fleeing a crime scene. Protesters outside were chanting, "Sandy, Sandy, Sandy." The CNN cameras caught all of it. By the time Bongino walked off stage, the video was already viral. 20 million views in the first hour, 50 million by morning. Every phone in America would see the abuela moment by the next day. The champagne socialist had been destroyed. Not by conspiracy theories, not by lies. By her own record, her own choices, her own hypocrisy. And Queens, real Queens, not Westchester pretending to be Bronx, had delivered the verdict. The town hall ended at 9:47 in the evening. By 9:48, the video was everywhere. By morning, so was the truth. AOC's office released a statement calling the debate a right-wing ambush filled with distortions and personal attacks. It got ratioed so hard her social media team had to turn off comments within 24 hours. 3 things happened subsequently. First, champagne socialist became the #1 trending topic worldwide. Not just in America, but worldwide. The phrase entered the political lexicon overnight. Every future AOC policy announcement would be met with that phrase. Every tweet would get replies asking about her abuela. Every public appearance would feature Sandy from Westchester signs. Second, her primary challenger announced he had tripled his fundraising in one day. Small-dollar donors, working-class people from the actual Bronx, people tired of being represented by someone from Westchester playing dress-up. Third, even her allies went quiet. The squad released no statements of support. Bernie Sanders' team said no comment. The Democratic Socialists of America suddenly had scheduling conflicts when asked about her. By the end of the week, her approval rating in her district had dropped 23 points. Town halls were being scheduled by her challenger. Local businesses were posting Sandy from Westchester signs in their windows. The Bronx was rejecting her, and it was brutal to watch. Bongino did one interview with a local Queens station, sitting on his modest porch in Manhasset. "I do not take pleasure in what happened," he said, looking tired. "But lies needed to be exposed. Working people deserve representatives who are actually from where they say they are from, who actually care about jobs, not just Twitter trends, who help their own family before lecturing others about caring." The interviewer asked if he regretted the abuela moment. "Not for a second," Bongino said. "That was not about politics. That was about character. She had $1 million and let her grandmother suffer while strangers tried to help. What does that tell you about someone? He looked directly at the camera. She thought she would destroy a cop from Queens. Instead, she got destroyed by Queens. Because Queens is real, and we don't tolerate fakes. The cultural impact was immediate and lasting. Late-night shows did segments. SNL did a brutal sketch. Conservative media ran the highlights on loop, but even liberal outlets could not defend her. The facts were too clear, the hypocrisy too obvious, the grandmother story too heartbreaking. How is your abuela became the new thanks Obama, except it actually hurt politically. Sandy from Westchester replaced her name in conservative circles. Champagne Socialist was printed on T-shirts, bumper stickers, and coffee mugs. And every time AOC tried to pivot back to policy, someone would ask about the Tesla, or the Met Gala, or the grandmother, or the jobs she killed. She had built a brand on authenticity, on being real, on representing working people. And in 90 minutes at a Queens town hall, Dan Bongino had exposed it all as performance art. Designer socialism, champagne populism. The reckoning was complete. If this story opened your eyes to who AOC really is, share it with everyone you know. Let them see what happens when a champagne socialist meets someone who actually grew up working class. The Bronx deserves better than Sandy from Westchester. Working people deserve better than millionaire socialists. And America deserves the truth. Share this comment below with your favorite moment. Tag someone who needs to see this. Because real recognizes real, and AOC ain't real. The champagne socialist bubble always pops eventually.